Hello, I'm Heeyoon Kim from Cornell University.
I'm Bogyung Kim from Yonsei University.
We would like to briefly introduce our research titled To Be in Vogue, How Mere Proximity to High-Status Neighbors Affects Aspirational Pricing in the U.S. Fashion Industry. The theoretical motivation behind our paper stems from research on organizational status. Prior status research has emphasized that in order to ascend the status hierarchy, organizations have to be endorsed by or partner with high-status others. However, actual affiliations with high-status partners are difficult because there tends to be status homophily. High status wants to affiliate with other high-status organizations. In this paper, we propose an alternative pathway through which lower status organizations can access status-based benefits. And we specifically focus on aspirational pricing, as firms can raise the prices of their products when they're perceived as higher status. To this end, we argue that relative proximity to high-status actors, even absent any sort of bilateral or consensual relationship, can benefit lower status organizations when the audiences can visually observe that proximity. We make an important distinction between absolute and relative location, which I'll illustrate using an example. So imagine that you're purchasing a plane ticket. So one could choose between first class, business class, or economy. And I might pay a high price and buy a first-class ticket, whereas Bogyung may be more reasonable and buy economy. By being in first class, others may perceive me to be higher status. This is a strategic decision that firms may make as well. So they pay more to be in a high-status location, and they benefit from that. So as opposed to absolute locations, we focus on relative locations or relative proximity to other high-status actors. So Bogyung and I, we may be both in business class, and we happen to be sitting next to a high-status person. The important distinction here is that the focal actor, us, we do not have full control over our neighbors. In other words, our study is focusing on somewhat random positioning next to high-status actors and theorizing and testing whether mere proximity, absent a relationship to high status, can give the focal firm latitude to price higher. Our hypotheses are twofold. First, we argue that when the focal firm is merely proximate to prominent high-status firms, the audiences will form a perceived association between them and group them into the same or similar status bracket. And this will elevate the status perception of the focal firm, and they'll be able to engage in aspirational pricing. Second, we look at who benefits most, low status, middle status, or high status. And we argue that it will be the middle status firms that benefit most from being proximate to high status others. First, because they have the largest motivation to exploit the opportunity created through relative spatial proximity. And second, for low status actors, they could experience a contrast effect as opposed to assimilation. Because the status gap between a low status firm and a prominent high status neighbor is significantly large, the audiences are going to be less convinced that they belong in the same status bracket. Therefore, we argue that it'll be the middle status firms that are most likely to engage in aspirational pricing once they're located proximate to prominent high status others.
Okay, I will continue on explaining how we test our hypothesis. We use a multi-method approach of quantitative analysis and online experiment. First, we found support for our hypothesis based on panel data in the US fashion industry between 2000 and 2014. The visually observable space we focus on is the ad space created in one of the most prestigious fashion magazine, Vogue. This is a contrasted list of advertisements in Vogue's September issue in 2009. We ordered the advertisements and counted the number of ads from PHSF, that's it, prominent high-status firms within a 3-order difference. For example, here are 2 different companies, Ralph Lauren Collections and Gap. For these 2 fashion company, within the 3-order differences as shown in these boxes, there are 2 and 1 advertisements from PHSF respectively. Based on this number, we then show that this proximity to other high-status firms positively affect the average listed price of their products featured in Vogue editorials in the next year. Furthermore, we found that middle status firms like Ralph Lauren Collections are more likely than other firms like Gap to increase listed price of their fashion products once they're being next to high status organizations. Our online experiments provided converging evidence that the relative proximity indeed increased the perceived perceptions, status perceptions of the focal firm. The middle status companies are most likely to benefit from such locations. Then, what are our theoretical contributions and practical implications? Theoretically, we think our paper contributes to status literature. Many studies in this field have emphasized the importance of bilateral or consensual relationship for lower status organizations to access status-based benefit. We argue differently that as long as audience perceive association between the focal company and its high status neighbor, the focal company can access status-based benefit, importantly, even without the consent from high status organization. In addition, many studies in this field have argued that middle status organizations are likely to suffer from their unclear and uncertain status positions. We suggest differently that this uncertainty can actually create an opportunity for middle status organizations to have better access to status benefits through proximity to other high status organizations. Finally, we suggest an agentic aspect of status growth and demonstrated that special proximity allows the focal companies to attempt to improve their status by engaging in aspiration pricing. Practically, our papers have two important implications. First, our study shows how strategic choices, such as choosing an absolute locations, can affect luck, such as the relative locations to other high status neighbors. So managers need to understand this intertwined relationship between strategic choices and luck and make decisions based on this understanding. Our study also suggests that a visually observable space, such as ad space, like our setting, but also geographical locations, can have a significant impact on how audience perceive the organization and its associates. So managers must take a closer look at where they're located in visually observable space. To conclude, our paper is about how random spatial proximity to other high status neighbors can allow the focal companies to access status-based advantages, such as aspiration pricing for otherwise similar companies. Thank you very much for your attention, and I hope you enjoy our paper.